Well, hey there. Welcome to the New Day podcast. Before we dive into this episode, go ahead and like and subscribe on Apple or Spotify or Google or wherever you listen to podcasts for more great content just like this. And today I'm looking forward to diving into today's episode, which is all about election reflections. So in case you've been living under a rock for the past couple of weeks, we had a really, really big thing happen in the United States. We voted for a president or our next president, and Donald Trump was elected as the 47th president of the United States. So I'm sure every single person watching this has some opinion on that, and we have some reflections on kind of how do we think through this as believers and just as just citizens of the U.S. And so, John, I'm gonna let you kick it off for us. Why don't you get us started? Like, what's your immediate reflections on Tuesday?
Yeah, so like you said, I think this is more about the election itself than any particular candidate. So important to note that. And so, yeah, just what are our reflections on what just happened? I think that one of the things I think, and I'm sure a lot of people feel, is I'm glad it's over. Not everybody is glad it's over because some people maybe didn't like the way that it turned out. But I just mean that in the sense of, elections can bring up division within our nation and within relationships, and it can just bring out some unfortunate things. It feels like, and it's always been this way, this is not a new thing, that the way you get elected is to talk ill of your opponent. And so I think that, that just creates a level of chaos. And so I think a lot of people are kind of glad we're beyond that. We had a process and we did it. And, we're moving on. And like I said, the beauty of our system is that if you don't like the candidate that was selected, you can pick a different one in 4 years. And President Trump will be his second term. And so he cannot run again unless something crazy changes. And so even if you don't like the result, there can be a different result in a few years, right? So I think I'm glad it's over, kind of back to normal life and what really matters. And I think for a lot of us, myself included, I did not get too wrapped up in it. And so I'm sure a lot of people maybe didn't feel much of a difference, but I think there's just a level of relief that we had the process and it's over. So that's my first reflection. I would imagine most people are kind of glad that it's over. One more thing I'll say on that too is I was reminded that we do this every 4 years, which I'm like, that's not that bad. And so it's like, we will not have another election for a president for, I guess 3 more years until the next election cycle begins.
They start running, the day after.
They do.
Kind of jostling.
Yeah, they do. But in terms of the actual election and like the ads, I don't know who it was, but I swear I never signed up for anything with my phone number. I got so many text messages about the country's on the line, go vote now. And vote for this judge. I was getting blown up. My wife's phone was getting blown up. I kept typing stop, but then it never stopped, And so I think my number got leaked, but I'm assuming that's not just me. And so, the ad.
Did you sign up for the discounts at Costco or something?
Something, yeah. I occasionally get the things where it's the snail mail where it's your information was leaked. And if you want to sue, do X, Y, Z, I'm like, what's the big deal? It's not that big of a deal. But I guess some political people got that. But like I said, I think I'm just glad that it's over. What about you?
Yeah, my kind of first reflection is a little bit more on the personal side. I think I've mentioned this before if you've watched this podcast, that I was a political science major in college. And so kind of started my kind of early 20s being really, really into politics. But over time, as I've gotten more serious about my faith, I've kind of grown a lot more serious about that and, engage with politics, but it's not my whole world, but this particular election, personally, I did something that I've never really done before. And that's I seriously prayed for both the candidates. Sounds like a Jesus, pastor juke, I know, but I seriously prayed for them because I read in First Timothy as part of our Bible reading plan, part of our church this year. I read First Timothy. It said pray for people in high positions, and so I found myself praying for both, and I feel like God just really kind of blessed my heart in that, removed any anxiety around this election, and honestly kind of gave me a certain level of love for both parties and people who vote different ways, and I think that's true. It's hard to hate someone who you're praying for. So this time, just going into this election, I just wasn't as nervous or anxious about it. just like someone's going to win and like the sun is still going to shine the day after. And I feel like a big part of that was just kind of like just prayer and just like trusting in the Lord. So that was like my personal experience, like with this election.
That's good. Yeah, another one for me was, and we had talked about this. We had a guess that this election would actually not be as contentious as a lot of people were making it out to be. And I do think that was correct. I think every election is contentious. I mean, the first election that I ever paid attention to, I think, was Obama and Mitt Romney back in the day. And I remember that was a very contentious election. And in my opinion, everyone since then has been contentious. Yeah. And I think people were looking at this one and saying like, man, the way this is building up, like with all the political polarization that just seems to keep increasing, and what happened last time with the election, the pandemic and January 6th and all that kind of stuff, like, man, this is going to be insane. And my sense was that people are a little bit tired, and everything that can be said has been said. And so my honest thought was like, it would not be as contentious. And I think it was contentious, but I think it was probably less contentious overall than people were assuming that it would be, with, Trump running again and things like that. I think another thing too, which is like, I think last time when Trump ran the first time, like there was a lot of fear around him. And of course, he's not a perfect person, and, I know he's not everyone's cup of tea. But the whole thing of, well, he's going to become Hitler and things like that. Like, he was the president for 4 years prior, and those things did not materialize. And so I think a lot of the, maybe that level of demonization, though there's always a healthy level of criticism for any candidate. Every candidate has done things or, needs to be critiqued on things. But some of the more extreme things, I think maybe fell flat because he has been the president before, and, America didn't burn down. So I just think that, like, while a lot of people would have liked this to have been more contentious, I think America is kind of tired. And I think also everybody just kind of is where they're at. I think there is some shift that we'll talk about here in a second in terms of kind of how people are viewing things, but I just didn't see a lot of people changing their minds. And so it's like these candidates are running their candidacy for president, and people are listening, and they generally know from the beginning who they're going to vote for or what their voting strategy is going to be. And the day came and people did it. And so I just think that it wasn't as contentious as some predicted it to be, which I felt like was a good thing. And I hope maybe it's a wake-up call for all of politics to maybe try to bring a little bit of winsomeness and positive vision. And because you can only take so much negativity, and a human can only take so much fear and critique of the other person, that I think we've exhausted those muscles politically. And so you can say all the bad stuff, and we've all heard it before, and all the negative stuff. And so my hope is that maybe if you do want to fire people up more next time, you could maybe go a little bit more of like issues based, here's what I'm going to do, and less like critiquing, people's, just different things about the candidate. So yeah, I think it was a little bit less contentious, and I will be interested to see what happens going forward.
Yeah. I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but I know in like several counties, and maybe even just the general popular vote, I know that like voter registration was up, but then like the actual voter turnout was, I think, lower, especially in a lot of places than in like 2020. And so probably lends a little bit to what you're saying. Like people are not as like apathetic, but I don't know, just like not as like contentious, So I thought that was interesting, and I don't have like a fully fleshed out, kind of reflection on what that means, but just the fact that voter turnout was a little bit lower on this one may just go to show that people like don't think that this is going to like change their world like entirely as much as like maybe in the past. Certainly like the president sets the cultural narrative and maybe some economic policy, but at the end of the day, like people's lives are a lot more like local, which we've talked about before. So I just find that interesting how like this, I don't think it's apathy that like kept some people from voting. Maybe it is just like, I don't know, this isn't as like important as I thought it would be.
Man, can I speak to that? Because what you just said fits perfect with my next thing. And I think they go together. So what I was going to say was that obviously like the Trump win shows somewhat of the out of touchness of the media or the elites and kind of what they're saying about things and how it's going and what people are thinking. But I think it plays to your point as well, where it's like everybody is saying this is like the most important thing of all time. And what a lot of the numbers are showing is people didn't think that as much as they thought that they would. And so it's like there's a difference between what's happening in the media, and now that includes social media, and what the talking heads are saying and what the news is saying and what the political figures are saying and what the everyday person is thinking and experiencing. And so, yeah, that's a great point, that like people are saying like this is like the end all be all. And a lot of people weren't even motivated to go vote, and voting is very easy to do these days. And so, yeah, I think that's a big thing too, is like, I think that they're just Trump winning this by the margin that he won it. I mean, he won the popular vote. He won the electoral college by a good amount. And I believe he won like every swing state they were looking at. I mean, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, every swing state he won. And the pollsters were not saying that that would be the case. And so it just goes to show that they are, not getting an accurate read on what's happening. And I think that should create a lot of humility in the media and in everybody, and also help us to take with a grain of salt all the things that are being said, because like nobody speaks for America as a whole besides America as a whole. And even us, like right now, we are being a level of talking heads, and we're sharing some thoughts, but we have to humbly say like not everything that we say is golden. And that's why even we're saying like election reflections, we're reflecting on this. We're two guys, and we're doing this because it's good to hear from politicians. It's also good to hear from pastors, and we need all these different perspectives to have, once again, an accurate perspective. And so if we're only listening to one source or one candidate or one channel, the one thing we can know is that we are out of step with what's really happening. We need a variety of voices. And I think this just showed us that the media, the elites, and even I think the politicians are out of step with the everyday person. And hopefully in the future that can get resolved.
Well, let's talk about media a little bit. So you talked about kind of like the two different worlds that, it's like the media elites and like the kind of the big networks, whichever one you watch, like Fox or CNN or MSNBC, there's kind of like that world. And then there's like real life. But then there's also, I think we saw in this election, the kind of the alternative media, for lack of a better, like we used to call it like the alternative media, like back in the day, like mainstream media, alternative media, but like it's kind of like the new wave of like where people are getting like their information from. And I think like we have definitely diversified that. And I think that lends to, honestly, where some people in the mainstream media are like kind of big time media were kind of surprised by what happened. But there's whole undercurrents of like people and podcasters that like people are listening to. So speak to that a little bit.
When I saw, and I posted this, when I saw Trump was going to go on Joe Rogan, I mean, I was like that, like I was shocked by that. And I was like, wow, things are changing. And honestly, for Trump, good move. Like if he, Rogan has an audience that probably truly is politically diverse. I know people that listen to Joe Rogan, which is like the most well-known listened to podcast probably in the world, but for sure in America. I don't listen super closely, but I listen a little bit just because I do respect how he brings on a variety of voices across the board. And he might be the only one doing that, genuinely just to listen. I think if you listen to his podcast, like he brings on people from all different sides and all different worldviews. And honestly, maybe that's a secret to part of his success and what people are kind of longing for. But yeah, I think it showed that like, and even Kamala Harris did this, where she went on a few different like well-known podcasts that are more kind of prone to probably more progressive thinking people. And so, yeah, that was huge. Those things happened and they were promoted a lot. And so I think it's showing that what's happening in the media is it's getting diversified, which I do think is good. I just think we have to make sure that it doesn't become a different version of like, we get sucked into our own little niche, if you will. Cause it's like Fox News and CNN are big niches, but podcasts can become small niches. And so, but yeah, I think that was huge. And the fact that Trump would make time to go on a podcast. I mean, I remember when that word just seemed kind of like goofy and random, even though we're doing a podcast right now. Like that has become a very real thing. And I think it also shows for the younger voters. Like I don't watch cable news. I have no desire to watch cable news. I don't pay for I don't have cable. I have a couple different streaming services that I use. I watch a lot of YouTube. I'm probably part of that younger voting demographic where I'm just not, I'm not sold at all on any of like the big news networks. And so I'm looking for alternative sources. And so, yeah, for someone like me, once again, if I was less informed already and Trump went on Rogan, I mean, that would have been something I would have really kind of perked up for. And so, yeah, some things are changing, things are shifting. Also, JD Vance went on the Theo Vaughn podcast. And these are like comedian guys. These guys are comedians and these are presidential candidates. And so, say what you want. Some people would say it's like the demification of America, that like the jesters of the day are hosting political candidates and those are getting like the highest ratings, but I don't take it that negatively. I see it as like I think podcast creates real, more down to earth conversation than produced news does. And so I think that people feel like they can trust it a little bit more. And once again, I hope that's a trend that continues. I hope that political figures do all kinds of media and meet with all kinds of people, because I think we get a better sense as to what they really think. Like I don't need was like Van Jones from CNN and Brett Mayer from Fox, like interviewing these those guys. Like the problem with media figures is I think they don't seem real. They are like, they don't seem like people. They seem like media personalities.
Right.
And I just think that the more down to earth, like I was also hoping that like Joe Rogan would moderate a debate, I thought that would have been really cool, or let's get some guy no one's ever heard of to moderate a debate, just to where it's not about the personality, just like, hey, I really don't understand what this means, instead of like all these like leading questions. And so, but media's changing, and that's a great point, man. That was a very fascinating thing. What do you think about Trump going on Rogan?
I remember when the thing for political candidates was like, it's kind of a little bit edgy for them to go on like the night shows or something like that. Like the Tonight Show or like or Stephen Colbert or something like that. I remember that kind of being the thing in the past like 15 years or so. But yes, to see Trump go on Rogan, like I think that's a huge, like that has huge cultural significance, that this guy has like a massive audience and like a certain audience that probably CNN like isn't reaching, And I think it was really interesting kind of like the final days. I remember Harris was like, they were kind of going back and forth about her kind of getting on there. And I think it was definitely seemed to be in retrospect, like a strategic mistake for her, like not to do that, not to get into these places and in front of people who are actually watching these podcasts.
Can I throw one thing out there though?
Sure.
And once again, I mean, this is just, I'm a guy, I'm one pastor. This is my honest take. So I liked that Rogan was willing to have both candidates on his podcast. I don't know all the details about why the Harris thing didn't work out. I think they couldn't, there was something going on there. I think he was willing to have her, but it just didn't work out for a couple of different reasons. However, when he interviewed Trump, my honest opinion was, and I listened to like the whole thing, I didn't feel like he didn't really challenge Trump at all. Like if you listen to the pod, it was kind of softball stuff.
They ended up endorsing him, right?
And he ended up endorsing him. And so to me, that was, I wouldn't say disappointing, but I'm just like, that, like in a weird way, it's like media is coming to the podcast, but or politics are coming to podcasts, but the podcasts are coming to politics. Because it's like they're like Trump going on Rogan's interesting, and then Rogan endorsing him is interesting. Like the day before too. And even Trump going on a few days before was interesting because it was almost like a last minute strategic decision that, hey, we want this to kind of like, we want this to help us. Like, no, we need to do this. So it was interesting. Like Rogan did not challenge Trump at all. And I thought the whole point, like at the end of it, I remember thinking like, I kept waiting the entire time for Rogan to do what he normally does, which is he asks the hard questions or he doesn't let him off the hook. And I felt like he's done that with all of his guests, but he didn't do it with Trump. And so if I'm being honest, it kind of made me think, and listen, it's okay for Rogan to support Trump if that's what he thinks, if that's his thing, and he ended up endorsing him. But it was almost portrayed as if like, well, Rogan's going to do a very non-biased kind of interview or whatever. And then he comes on, it doesn't really challenge him at all, endorses him 2 days later. And it's like, okay, is Rogan just now another conservative news source? And if you are, you can be that, then that's fine, right? But I just, that was an interesting thing where it was like, so even as I was saying that, I wanted to kind of clarify because I was excited about him going on there, but I just was kind of wanting a little bit more of like some of the real talk. And so maybe it just shows the power of these political figures. Like you think you can be alternative, but then when you get in their presence, it's like so, and once again, I mean, like I said, Rogan from a political perspective, if he's just like, I'm all about Trump and I like him and I'm down with him, like that's totally cool. But that would be a pivot that he would have to acknowledge because he has kind of marketed himself as like this, like no nonsense, whatever kind of person. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the days ahead. But I think we know it's going to happen because I guess he endorsed him. One more thing I would mention really quick. I think it kind of plays in this too. I think America in some ways is what I think an interesting thing. I think the election shows this. I think America is becoming slightly more conservative while simultaneously becoming slightly less Christian. I think that's probably very real. If one of those things is wrong, it might be that America is not becoming slightly less Christian, because I do think there are moments where I see some bubblings of potential kind of revival, or like people really being more open to Christianity than previously. But I just think that like when you look at guys like Rogan or Musk endorsing Trump and voting Republican, like these are people who are, in their words, kind of, voting to the right now more so, but nothing to do with Christianity or biblical values or anything like that. And so I just think that's something interesting to watch. I think even to some degree, I think Trump represents that in some ways, like I think there are ways in which, maybe Trump has like legislated in ways that align with my values. And I'm appreciative for that. Like I am like, I'm thankful when someone says the Bible is a good thing, and so we give credit where credit's due. But then you have things where, one of the big stories was Trump's wife, Melania, came out as pro-choice like a couple months prior, and he was kind of having to answer to that a little bit. And so there are just moments where I'm like, there was a time where you would think back in the day, if you're evangelical, you're probably more likely to kind of maybe vote more to the right on certain things because of social issues. But there's just a changing of that guard, I feel like. And so I think it's an interesting thing to watch where, the right is becoming, I think, very, maybe economically conservative is the better way to put it. The social aspect or the morals, seem to, if I'm honest, not be as clear on certain things. Like, because even for an example, like I don't think Trump would, like he doesn't support like a national abortion ban, and, Republicans for a long time would just support that, So I think that's just something interesting to watch, and something that is intriguing, that like even the biggest endorsements that you could argue that he got were people who were not Christians, who were voting for a candidate who is on the conservative side. So I think that's something interesting to watch. But what about you, man? You got anything else?
Yeah, probably my last one is just, I always like to reflect on this current cultural moment, but in light of kind of like the historical church, and kind of, from where I stand as like a Christian, as someone who's a part of the church, as a pastor. And, my reflection is just that like the church is it's a transcendent and resilient organization, and like organism or entity or whatever you want to call it. It's transcendent, and therefore it can thrive under any like political regime or party. And I think whether it's a Democratic president or a Republican president, like the church can thrive under that person, and there's going to be like unique like challenges and opportunities that come with that, right? So maybe, if Trump gets elected, maybe like there is more alignment with like general religious freedom, or like maybe things like that. But maybe the challenge for the church now is like to promote unity and to draw people into like the gospel in a time where maybe people are going to be more divisive. Or if Harris had won, maybe we are like kind of like buttoning down on kind of what we believe, and trying to be like, well, we believe this because this is what the Bible says. So I think the church is going to thrive, and we're going to thrive. And the more people kind of disengage from the political God, if you will, and like attach to the real God and like his mission, his kingdom, his family, then it's going to go well. So I'm excited about the opportunity that we now face as the church, opportunity and challenges. And I think Jesus is obviously above it all. I'm not the first person to say that, but it's like it remains to be said every time we talk about politics.
Yeah, I think my last reflection, and that's so good, man, is probably just that I also in this election felt a unique sense of gratitude for our country and the country that we live in. I think obviously there are things that are broken and need to be fixed, but that's always the case. And like you said, it's like we're never going to get out of like there needing to be changed, because the Bible says we live in a broken, imperfect world. But I was just thankful for, like I said, like that I had the opportunity to vote if I wanted to, and everybody had a say in it, and people felt empowered by that. I think that was cool. And also, like I said, it's like, Trump won the election, and if you're a person that is excited about that, then you get to be excited about that. You get to be excited about your leader. And if you don't like Trump as president, then in 4 years, you get to vote again, and we all get to vote again, and there can be somebody else. And there for sure has to be somebody else.
Absolutely.
And so if you don't like, Trump as president, well, then this is the last time he's ever going to be president for these next 4 years, because he cannot run again. And you're like, wow, the beauty of our system of that. And also because when I look at other places, because we got to be honest, it's not perfect, but what are you comparing it to? And when I look out at the world and government and politics, I don't look at other places and think man, I want their results. I want it to be like that. I don't look at China or Russia or I don't know what's happening in Germany or France these days, right? But I don't look at other places and be like, man, we need to be like that. And so I think we don't have a perfect system, but we've got a pretty good system in place that gives people some say, but also has to clearly establish leadership in some way. There's also a breakdown of power. So there's I heard a lot about state elections and local elections as well. And so it's not just the president, there are so many decisions and things impacted by other forms of government. So I just felt thankful that there's a division of how things of how things work out, and people have a say in it. And there's different options. And if anything, maybe you could even argue from a very positive perspective, but the frustration that is felt is kind of the way in which everything is kept in check.
Yeah.
One side, I hate to say it, it's like both sides want to dominate and have all the power, and it's good that they can't. And it seems like also we've kind of gone back and forth on you have Democrat, Republican kind of back and forth. And so anyway, it just kind of seems like it's one of those things where, people have a say, and, there's a new opportunity every 4 years. And, like I said, I just think, and even people's involvement in it, maybe it shows that they know they have somewhat of an impact on it. So I'm thankful for our country. It's not perfect, but, even in that, I was able to celebrate with just the freedoms that I have, the ability to vote that I have. There are people in the world that do not have that opportunity. Yeah. And also as a church, we are obviously big on religious freedom, and the fact that we don't want we have so much confidence in our faith and what we believe as it being the truth. That we want people the freedom to do whatever they want and believe whatever they want, because we think that with that freedom comes a revelation of that truth, right? We don't need to force anything. And so we're just really big on that. And I think that America also represents that. And so America is a place of freedom and pursuing the truth. And I really do believe Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And so I really believe that whenever people go on that journey, that they find him. And so, but once again, I thought this election was just a reminder for me in that, and just how thankful I am for this country. And so once again, but I'm also glad that it's over. So.
Yeah, that's a really great thing to end on, just gratefulness and thankfulness for the country we live in. And I was at Churchill. It's the democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others, you know? And so it's just thankful.
That's exactly what I was trying to say, James. Thank you for summing it up that way.
So very thankful to have it over, but also thankful for the country we live in. So thank you guys so much for watching, and tune in next time.